Thank you all very much. It is truly a pleasure to be here. I first came to Tucson, I think in 91 or 92, on vacation for a couple of days, but I fell in love with the mountains and the saguaro, and I have been coming back every winter for 2 weeks ever since. So I'm very pleased to be here in sunny Tucson, and I'm very, very pleased to have been invited to talk with you. Where's John? How do I turn this on?
Push the button.
Amazing.
I told you we're gonna have some strange things happen. Yeah. What is that?
Well, I'll continue. Why me? Let me tell you all why and how I first became involved. My profession was sales, and I worked for Hewlett-Packard in their medical division, and I sold medical products that were used for monitoring in intensive care units. And I saw people there who were very sick, mostly dying, in pain, having no say in their treatment, having no hope for recovery, and making no contribution to society. And I said, I don't want to live like that. And that was when I joined Hemlock. How many of you have heard the name Hemlock? Wonderful. Can you, well, I don't know if we can advance it. Well, now you know a little bit about me. Let me ask you about you. How many of you are members of any of the 3 Right to Die organizations? The Friends from Green Valley. How many of you have a living will? How many of you have a durable power of attorney for health care? Excellent, but not everybody. How many of you are going to die one day? So maybe that's something we should be thinking about. I'm going to discuss briefly the status of the Right to Die movement in the U.S. and abroad. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Final Exit Network, a little bit about the legal cases against us, why I do what I do and risk prison, and what I think you can do.
Just tell me to change slides and I'll do here.
Continue. One more. This is Derek Humphrey. How many of you have heard of Derek Humphrey? Derek Humphrey was the founder of the Hemlock Society. He wrote a book initially called Jean's Way. He was a journalist in England, I should mention that first. He wrote a book called Jean's Way. In it, he described how he helped his wife to die when she was suffering from very painful breast cancer, and he wrote about it. His book, called Final Exit, and from which we get our name, was on the New York Times bestseller list for 17 weeks. And it's still available. He founded the Hemlock Society in 1980. He's a past president of the World Federation of Right to Die movements, of Right to Die societies, and today he lives in Eugene, Oregon, and he is my hero. He suffers from painful neuropathy of the feet, so he is not really getting around like he used to. Okay, John. This is his book. It is available from Amazon.com or in bookstores, but I would suggest that you order it if you want it from the website at the bottom, because it comes with an addendum, a little 4-page addendum that is not available in the bookstores or when you order it from Amazon. Okay, John. I'm going to go very fast. What I want to say is my talk normally takes about 40 minutes, so I'm going to be skipping over some things, but I've got all the slides here, and I hate when speakers do that. But I'm doing it so that if you happen to see something, a topic that's of interest, you could stay afterwards and I'll answer questions. How many of you even knew there was a World Federation of Right to Die societies? Yes, 46 societies from 27 countries. The Hemlock Society is no more, and they had about 40,000 members. Someone decided that the name hemlock had a negative connotation because it was a poisonous plant. And they changed their name, and it went through all these iterations. And basically, the old hemlock is now Compassion and Choices. There are 3 organizations currently active in the United States in pursuing the right for us to die with dignity. The smallest is us, and I'm going to talk a little more about Final Exit Network. Death with Dignity has about 9,000 supporters, and they work at the state level to get legislation passed, such as in Oregon and Washington State. They're currently pursuing the Right to Die agenda in Massachusetts and Vermont. Compassion and Choices is really the old hemlock. They have about 50,000 supporters, and their website is full of wonderful educational material. How to talk to your physician, how to talk to your family, where and how to fill out advance directives. It is a wonderful, wonderful website and a good organization. They currently advocate as a way to hasten your death if you are suffering, that you refuse food and water. It takes about 2 weeks. It often requires some medication to keep you comfortable, and it's very difficult for family to watch. That is not a method that we advocate. The smallest of these 3 organizations is Final Exit Network, and we broke away in 2004 from Compassion and Choices. We felt that they were not active enough on a one-to-one basis, and we wanted to work personally with people who had an incurable disease or intractable pain. And so Final Exit Network is the youngest of these organizations. Okay, Jim. All right, we're going to go through this very quickly. I believe everyone knows that Oregon was the first state to have a right to die. And that was in 1998. Now, what has happened in Oregon? Everybody said, oh my goodness, the doctors can provide lethal medication, and everybody is going to be dying, and they're going to cause the death of old people and disabled people. Well, first of all, there are some restrictions in Oregon. I think the 2 most important: you must be diagnosed as terminally ill with less than 6 months to live to get the lethal medication in Oregon. You must request it twice from your physician. You must have a written request also, and you must tell your next of kin. Well, what happened? The high bars are the number of people who requested the lethal medication, and the lower bars are the people who actually took their life using the medication, roughly 2/3. So what happened to the other 1/3? Some may have died a natural death anyway. Some may have changed their minds. And some may just be waiting. And knowing once they have the lethal medication, it's a comfort. And then some of them are able to continue living, knowing that once it's unbearable, they have the means to control their life. Washington State followed, and Montana. But the difference between Washington and Oregon and Montana is that Oregon and Washington State were a referendum of the people, of the state citizens. Montana was a court ruling. And so it's conceivable that at some point Montana may have a state referendum and overthrow that ruling. So for now, there are 3 states. Now, there was an interesting poll taken in Oregon as to why people wanted the lethal medication. 91% quoted a loss of autonomy. a loss of ability to engage in activities that they liked. 84%, and you could list many reasons. You didn't have, this was not just one. 84% said a loss of dignity. 56% said losing control of bodily functions. 35% said being a burden to others. And only 21% said pain. So physicians and others who claim if we could only treat pain, this whole issue would go away. That's not correct, according to this poll. I'm not going to spend much time on overseas. There are 5 countries that have some sort of a death with dignity law. I just want to mention what's happening in Great Britain. Great Britain is not one of the 5 countries. But in 2009, a woman named Deborah Purdy, who had multiple sclerosis, petitioned the court to rule that if her husband accompanied her to Switzerland to a clinic called Dignitas, where if you meet their criteria, you are given lethal medication, whether or not her husband would be prosecuted for assisting a suicide if he accompanied her to Switzerland and to the clinic Dignitas. There was a big to-do, and the court eventually put out guidelines and asked the public to comment. They received thousands of comments. And the result was that the guidelines published in the situation in Great Britain today is that if you assist a suicide, but your motives are pure, you didn't do it because you hated the person, you wanted their money, you wanted whatever, then you are not prosecuted. But if you had unpure motives, you are prosecuted. So it's very gray, and it leaves it in the hands of the individual judge.
Wow.
So far, there have been several cases, and no one has been prosecuted. Well, what about hospice? Hospice is wonderful. But in most cases, you have to be within 6 months of death to be admitted to hospice. What about drugs? Well, the problem with drugs is that you can't get them. It's very difficult. Physicians will not prescribe lethal medication. They're afraid of lawsuits. They were trained to save life, not end it. And there is an economic issue as well. Some people go to Mexico and get Nembutal. But if you get drugs overseas, how do you know that the purity is what it states it is? How do you know what the shelf life has been? Mexico is not controlled by the FDA. And we just think it's probably not illegal. It's just may not be what it says it is. Talk with your physician. Be careful. Be sure your physician truly is with us and understands that yes, there comes a time when we may want to hasten our death. And the reason I caution you is because there was a recent case in New Jersey where a man, an elderly man who was quite sick, said he wanted to hasten his death, and he ended up being put into a psychiatric hospital. Back on. Anyway, who contacts us? People with irreversible illnesses. We get a lot of calls from people with Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, Lou Gehrig's disease, cancer, stroke, and more recently, many calls from patients with Alzheimer's. Well, you all have our pamphlet So I'm not going to spend time on what we do. We are a national nonprofit organization. And when someone calls us, I'm going to briefly describe the process to you. Someone will call us and say, I have been given a diagnosis of Lou Gehrig's disease, for example. My paralysis is getting worse. I think I may not want to be a burden to my family, and I want to hasten my death. They will be, we say we'll have what we call a case coordinator call you back. And there are 2 trained case coordinators in the United States. So we screen these people, and they will receive, assuming that a case coordinator thinks they qualify, they will be assigned 2 exit guides, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We do not, okay, John. We do not encourage people to end their lives. We do not provide the means for people to end their lives. We do not provide any physical assistance. I'm missing a slide, but I should say. Everything that we do is within the law. All we do is provide information, First Amendment, and a compassionate presence. We do not break the law. I want to digress for a minute to talk about 3 taboo words. The first one is suicide. I do not use the word suicide. We do not. Suicide connotates violence. Someone shoots themselves. There's brains all over the place for people to clean up. And often suicide endangers others. You crash your car into another car. It is a taboo word for everyone. The word assist. How many think assist is a taboo word? Well, it is for Final Exit Network, because assisting a suicide is illegal in almost every state. We do not assist. That's a taboo word for us. We provide information. And what about the word death? That is your taboo. People don't want to talk about death. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to talk about it. That is not our taboo. Well, who objects to what we do? The far right, basically. The fundamentalists. I can't even say the Catholics, because many Catholics realize that prolonging life is not natural. But it's the far right, and they are very, very well funded. Well, how does it work? The case coordinator, can you try one more, John? Okay, hold it there. Let me tell you a little bit about the 2 legal cases against us, because one happened right here in Phoenix. That was the first case. It started, I think, about maybe 2008 or so, maybe 7. And there was a young woman who took her life with us providing the information. I have to be careful what wording I use. And her sister found literature from Final Exit Network around her house and called the police. We knew about the case, but nothing further was happening until Georgia. Well, I should mention the Phoenix trial before I go on to Georgia. Eventually, when the case in Georgia surfaced, Phoenix took it off the back burner and moved it to the front burner and arrested 4 people. They could have faced up to 20 years in prison. But there was a trial, In 2011, in Phoenix, the trial lasted 2 weeks. There was 2 days of jury deliberations, and in the end, our medical director was found not guilty. 2 of the women who had early pled guilty because they were afraid, they were elderly, they were not well, they were afraid of jail sentences. They ended up with a year's probation and a fine. And one of the exit guides who also pled not guilty ended up with a fine and a year's probation, and no one went to jail in Phoenix. Go up to the Georgia trial. Well, in Georgia, there was a man who had cancer of the jaw, and his face was very deformed, and he didn't want to live. He was, I believe, in his 60s. He was accepted into our program, and when he took his life, his wife, with whom he had not been living for 2 years, found final exit network literature and called the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation decided they needed to find out more about how final exit network operated. And they had an undercover agent, we now know he was an undercover agent, call us and say he had cancer of the pancreas and he was in a great deal of pain. He went through all the paperwork requirements and he was accepted into the program. One of our requirements is that someone do a 1-hour interview with the person over the phone, and it's about 22 questions, very, very routine. Where do you live? Why do you want to end your life? Is your condition getting worse? How fast? That sort of thing. I was the one on that case who did that intake interview. He also sent us what we now know was fraudulent doctor statement, verifying that he had the condition he had. When our people went down to be present at the exit, the police came out from the adjoining rooms and arrested the 2 people that were there, and then 2 others. So there were 4 people arrested in Georgia. They could have faced up to 20 years in prison each. We filed a countersuit claiming that they were arrested in violation of the First Amendment. And folks, literally 3 weeks ago, the Georgia Supreme Court ruled in our favor, and all of the charges were dropped against these 4 people. The legal expenses to final exit network for both of these cases, Phoenix and Atlanta, have totaled about $600,000 because good lawyers don't come cheap. If the citizens of Georgia knew how much was being spent to chase us instead of criminals and rapists, I don't think they would be very happy. Now, what Georgia did, what the Georgia Bureau of Investigation did, was decided they needed still more information after the arrest of the 4. So they proceeded with a series of raids. They sent 2 people from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to 14 different homes across the United States to go in and search the homes. Mine was one of them. They had a warrant, so they were legal in what they did. I was actually in Tucson, and I got a call from my neighbor. And she said, Judy, there are 4 police officers in your house. Essentially, when I got home, I found that they had taken my computer. They had taken all of my files, my CDs, the paperwork. They had made a mess in my office. They had overturned my mattress. They had rummaged through my underwear drawer. And they had made a big mess. All legal. Now, I did get one thing back. I had a little CD and it was marked policies and regulations, and it pertained to my condominium association. Well, as I said, I do intake interviews. I'm also what we call an exit guide. If someone is accepted into the program, what we call an exit guide will make a physical visit to them, most likely 2 exit guides. And that will be the first time that anyone from Final Exit Network has had physical contact with the applicant. Everything else will have been done by phone. We'll verify that yes, they want to end their life. What is your timetable? They may want to take their life tomorrow. They may want to wait 5 years. They may say, I'm not sure, I'll call you. All of that is fine. And we continue to verify that yes, they do want to take their life. Can you go through how you feel? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay. So why do I do this and risk prison? Although no one has yet gone to prison. I really think that Dr. Martin Luther King said it best. He said there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. Well, how do we explain this to people who say, you all are crazy? Think of it as a roadway along the way to human rights. In the 20s, women fought for the right to vote. In the 60s, the blacks fought for equal rights. In the 90s, the disabled fought for equal access. Right now, we're going through the fight for gay rights. And we truly believe that the fight of the 21st century will be for the right to a death with dignity. Well, what can you do? That's our website. First of all, support the 3 organizations that are fighting for your right. But if you can only support one, please choose Final Exit Network. And there's a application with the pamphlet that we left on the chairs for everyone. Order a copy of Final Exit from Derek Humphrey's website. Please, the few of you that haven't, fill out a durable power of attorney for health care. And probably, most importantly, tell your family. We all remember Terry Schiavo, that horrible case in Florida. She had told no one. She was young. She wasn't ever thinking about death. So please, please, make sure your family knows what you want and don't want in the way of treatment if you can't speak for yourself. Now, one very good way to do that is this document. It's a 1-page document. It is not a legal document. It's put out by the Global Ministry Board of the United Methodist Church. And I like it so much because there's a wealth of information in this 1 page. One column basically says, the doctors say I'm going to recover. The middle column says the doctors are unsure. And the far right says there is no hope. And down the left are a series of treatments: antibiotics, ventilation, resuscitation, dialysis, and so on. And under each column, you can say, I would want it, I wouldn't want it, I'm not sure, or I would like a trial. And if the trial is not beneficial, discontinue. Well, use this document as a basis to provide very detailed information to the person who holds your power of attorney. And when I speak at colleges, I hand this out to the students, and I say, use this document to talk to your parents and find out what they would want and what they wouldn't want if they can't speak for themselves. And I will close by just wishing you all a good life and a good day.